Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SourceForge Podcast. I'm your host, Bo Hamilton, Senior Editor and Multimedia Producer here at SourceForge, the world's most visited software comparison site where B2B software buyers compare and find business software solutions. Today, we're joined by Ian Cook, Senior Vice President of AI at Qloo, a company that has built one of the most advanced cultural intelligence platforms in the world. Qloo uses AI to map the hidden connections between people's tastes in things like music and film and fashion and travel and even brands. And basically, they're decoding the world's taste genome, is what they like to call it, helping find similarities or commonality between all the different things people like or interact with. And they're often described as a B2B to C company, as their API can help businesses connect data to real world results, which businesses can then integrate into various consumer-facing tools or services. Dating apps are a great example. If you have people who are on maybe a Tinder platform where one person likes EDM, they can match well with someone on the platform who likes high intensity hip hop, for example. But that's just one example. A coffee shop might use Qloo to determine which type of music retains the most customers in the lobby. Metal music might not be the preferred choice as opposed to something like jazz, for example. But there's a ton of different use cases. So we have a lot to talk about here. I'll ask Ian how AI is transforming the way companies understand culture and predict consumer behavior. We'll talk about what makes Qloo's approach to personalization different from the algorithms behind maybe some of your favorite streaming recommendations. And we'll also get Ian's take on some of the most surprising insights Qloo's AI has uncovered, and then just where everything is headed into the future. So with that said, let me introduce Ian Cook. Ian, welcome to the podcast. Glad you could join us.
Thanks so much for having me, Bo. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So now, believe it or not, I had your CEO, Alex Elias, on the show. He was the first episode of the SourceForge podcast. So that was really exciting. And he had a lot to share about Qloo and a lot of insights to offer. So listeners, longtime listeners should remember that and be somewhat familiar with Qloo. But I would still love for you to lay the groundwork and give us an overview of the company in your own words. What is Qloo and the Taste AI engine?
Appreciate the chance. The short version of what we talk about is AI for consumer taste, or the AI of consumer taste. I usually use a description that says what we do is attempt to map the cultural interests at any given moment and back over time from, as you mentioned, the key items that have people talking, things about movies, books, restaurants, hotels, the kinds of places they go, brands in terms of the most recent athleisure clothing, or something, streetwear, or some hot new restaurant, or to compare hotels that they've been to and loved, and they're going to a new place and they want to see new and different places that they might like that they haven't been to yet. And we capture all of that and understand what people are interacting with to say as an expression of their interest. This is what interests me. This is what captures my attention. This is what I want to be interacting with. So when I say all of that to somebody, it's like, oh, what is it you do? So I work in AI, and I've been doing that for years now. And Qloo's been around for about 13 years, building what I think of as is a massive knowledge graph that maps the connections among all these different entities. This is a way to say, I know of a particular entity, say Nike, or a Hilton, or some new brand, or a hip hop artist. And I know aspects of what they do. They perform live. They perform a certain genre of music. You mentioned jazz, so maybe they're in bebop, or they're in hip hop, and there's a certain flavor of hip hop. And be able to say, these are the kinds of things that constitute that entity, so that I can figure out how to connect someone else that might be interested in something like you mentioned, EDM, who wants high intensity music, wants physical experience, wants to be out in the world with someone who likes that, but would normally be listening to hip hop. And how do we put those things together? And more usefully, how do we get companies to understand how to put those things together to improve their rate on connecting with their customers, connecting with certain people who may want to buy their thing, who may want to go to their restaurant, who may want to purchase books, who may want to do recommendations. So our little slug line, again, is the consumer of AI taste. I really think of this as like the vibe map for culture. Like, this is what people are interested in. This is what people have actively said, I like this, I'm interested in it, I've purchased this book, I've made a recommendation, I've reviewed this movie. So we have a very active sort of sense of what it is people are engaging with at any time. We make all that available through an API. Our major customers use that API to then flesh out and enhance their data and their understanding of the groups that they interact with, the ones they want to interact with. And we can get into this later, but we provide a very different kind of set of information to what we think they generally would have.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for breaking that down. I just love the business model and everything you guys are working on, because I feel like you're really at the kind of underpinning of AI and all the headlines and craze that we've been reading about. And you're like also Qloo is also like connecting, like bringing AI to some of these establishments, businesses, industries that typically you wouldn't expect AI to really integrate with on the surface level. I mean, like coffee shops, for example, or restaurants, right? Just kind of using that data and artificial intelligence to connect the dots between culture and personalization and preference. I think it's just really interesting. And I like the taste genome, and then you mentioned the vibe, what'd you call it? The vibe.
I call it a vibe map. We have a huge knowledge graph. If people know the term, there's nodes and then connectors and all of those. But think of it as a huge map where I can traverse space going from, what I truly love is Black Coffee, the music artist, and where is that going to take me? And then I truly love like a very bespoke kind of coffee from these coffee shops. Where do those cultures and tastes come together? And I can provide the map for how to get to it. So like that coffee shop you mentioned, what we really want to be doing is making AI available, or the results from AI. So that coffee shop doesn't have to worry about like getting involved and figuring out how to set up a connection to, who knows, OpenAI or Anthropic. But they get the results of what we're doing to say, we know where you are, we know your location, we know your clientele a little bit, we know the kind of vibe you're trying to set, and this is the music we think goes really well with it. So they get that benefit, the result of all that analysis and work without having to get their hands too dirty in terms of like the code and the interactions.
Yeah, I'm curious. In years past, before AI was the common term, you just had like machine learning algorithms, and I don't know. There's just all sorts of different kind of ways to describe using kind of automations and software to connect the dots between certain things. And so I'm just curious now with this AI movement we're in, how has AI in particular advanced the ability to uncover the type of connections you're making with Qloo's API?
I love that you're bringing this up. My persistent dad joke is that the only thing that got cooler about me as I got older is my job title. I started years ago doing statistics, and then I did econometrics, and that was kind of cool. And then I got a job doing data science. And then a little while later, my next job was as a machine learning engineer. And for a while I was a machine learning engineer. And then it started coming around that I was doing a lot of natural language understanding, natural language processing. And I was like, oh, well, that's really AI. And I was like, well, I thought the other stuff was AI. So suddenly I was like an AI. And to me, I've just been doing kind of similar things. Generative AI is definitely a function step above, and it's very different in the way I would understand things, again, as trained in statistics. So it is a totally kind of new world that we're working in here, but with some of the very same underpinnings. So like you mentioned, we used to have ML. I do a lot of ML. Qloo builds models that heavily use traditional machine learning based in the principles and the foundations of what good statistical methods are. We don't just toss everything into an LLM and go, well, I hope it, doesn't hallucinate that we're talking about wombats or something here. The huge step forward, I think, with the AI and the generative AI that we're using now is, I used to work heavily with the US government, and the term force multiplier, it just resonates constantly. We can move faster. We can test out new ideas. We can add to this knowledge graph. So if you think of this graph that we got, this map, there are descriptions of every entry on that map that we want to make relevant for people. The coffee shop, is it urban? Is it rural? Is it one I can work in? So it's, got some space and it's got some Wi-Fi, and it's one that's got some baked goods, or whatever those properties are. We can use AI to help flesh out those properties, break down some of the general tags and information we have about that into something a lot more refined, and that gives us a much better sense of exactly what's going on under the hood. So you find some top tier hotel in a major city, and we can take its location, then say, all right, what is it about this location? Who lives there? We take some of our models, We speed through understanding a bit about that through with LLMs or AI. We have traditional ML models. So it's all coming together. So I think this new world of generative AI has just been a multiplier in all of our experiments, our speed to market, the way we can rule out, we're going to test something. That didn't work. That's great. We can now move on. It helps us in code generation and evaluations to just be able to get through those things that would have taken us a lot longer in order to improve things for our customers way faster than we could before.
Yeah, the force multiplier is a great way to put it. And yeah, it takes some of the older technology, machine learning, and just puts it on steroids, allowing you to get more extractions quickly. I think that's great. And there's obviously some real value there. I mean, you look at you think of like Netflix and it's what's to continue to try and get to know us. I mean, every company wants to try to get to know us with some of these software tools, especially and streaming options. Spotify wants to help build playlists around your tastes. Obviously, dating apps I mentioned in the intro with trying to predict matches. So obviously, there's real value from that sort of data and those insights into consumers. I think a lot of times though, there's some of these recommendations still feel a little bit shallow, and they still have obviously room for improvement, and probably room. They need to really be paired up with a company like Qloo and like what you guys are doing. But I'm curious, what does the competition look like in terms of APIs that kind of try to do the same thing? And then maybe you could talk about, and you did touch on this earlier, but maybe you can talk about what sets your model apart from those other players.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not going to put any other like specific competitors on blast here. What I will say is I think a lot of what we compete against is internal data and internal views of who did we sell to? What did they buy? What did they interact with on our site? We are enhancing that with a sort of an outward looking view, rather than being inward looking and saying, all right, I offered this item on the website. They clicked on it. That must mean they want that. Therefore, we'll offer them more. This goes to the joke about things like the recommendations from you see in Amazon or Wayfair or whatever. You just bought a refrigerator. Are you interested in buying a refrigerator? And it's like, well, probably not. I've got, one. Some houses have a second one in the garage perhaps, or in the basement for a drinks fridge, but it's unlikely that that's going to be the case. But that's the kind of thing you're stuck with when you have just an inward looking model to say, I've got some marketing data and who is this? What we bring to the table is a much more outward facing. So somebody who is buying home products like that, appliances, might be more of a DIY person. Are they interested in these types of brands? Are they interested in home renovation podcasts? Are they looking for, interior design kind of recommendations and the companies that are really breaking through in new, interesting styles because they're doing that themselves? When you're stuck with the internal things or the things I think most traditional marketing will offer you, you've got kind of a narrowing it down to one person is like, well, I'm pretty sure they're about to buy a dishwasher because they bought a refrigerator, when we're much more expansive and aspirational and trying to understand what that person might be doing in their life at the time, so that sure, maybe they are buying a dishwasher, but what brands are they really interested in? Somebody really wants that high-end, German efficient brand in their appliances, terrific, but there might be other chances to sell things other than trying to figure out, well, they're just renovating their kitchens. Like there's a chance to go after these folks who are renovating their whole house and sell them music and tell them about podcasts and places you like tell the companies, here's where to advertise, here's where to put billboards, here's where to find the people who are interested in kind of what you're doing. So rather than a bit more of that navel gazing that I think happens at the massive e-commerce sites, we are looking out across the world and trying to understand what is it people want when they interact with a certain type of musician or a certain type of brand. So I think when we think about competitors, I don't know of too many that are trying to do that. So what we're really fighting against, or what we're really competing with here, are the internal sets. We're just like, well, this is the way I've done it in the past, and this is how I've constructed my marketing campaign, and this is how I'm going to allocate my spend, or these are the people I'm going to reach out to for partnerships. We want and can provide a much better, much more holistic sense of what's going on with that consumer.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, because I picture, obviously a lot of businesses and have a lot of internal data they're working with, but the secret sauce there is just trying to integrate that with the the bigger picture and the macro side of things. And that's no easy feat. I mean, taste is such a tricky thing, right? You can quantify habits, but you can't really, I don't know, measure why someone suddenly starts listening to like 90s hip hop again, or switches from like CSI Miami to cooking shows. I mean, because there are things that like you can punch that into your API and kind of see actually, on the surface level, yeah, this seems like two totally different topics or interests, but there actually is some similarities here.
Right. And going back to a lot of my academic experience, I can't help but be enough of a nerd to say that, I think what Qloo is really doing is capturing what economists will call revealed preference. There is this sense that the things I spend money on indicate what it is I need at the time. This indicates my preference. Fortunately, in the modern age, we don't have to wait until somebody actually expends money. There are so many interactions that people go through on social media, on review sites, on likes and sharing and interacting with brands that now are on all these different types of things. So obviously the Instagrams and the Threads and the X's of the world. We can get that kind of information and understand that when somebody shares, likes, comments, references it in a review, they're actually sharing something about their interests, what we would call revealed preference. The tough one, as always, is the kind of second thing you were talking about, which is causal. I don't know, and Qloo can't say to you like why all of a sudden you switched from bebop jazz to Nirvana. But what we can see is that same person likes both of those, and there might be a ton of them. And in which case, there's something about a raw edge and a loudness to the music that perhaps, we can say there are some other artists that you might like that don't fit into those, but match kind of nicely in between there. And that's perhaps how you can offer, here's a musician to listen to, here's a podcast to listen to, here's a book to buy, here's a movie to go to.
Right. Or if you're using if you're watching, again, back to like CSI Miami, and then they have an episode on, I don't know, the like local music scene or something, and maybe kind of resonates with you, or maybe their intro, you kind of connect like the music they use for their introduction with the show and the genre, maybe it kind of overlaps there.
That would be an interesting one. That would be a great thing to find out, is what people like about those. Because if I can just reveal my own preferences, there's a fantastic show that was on called Mobland with Tom Hardy. And it's just got an amazing intro song. And I discovered it only because of the show. And now I listen to the band that has the music there constantly. So, these types of things show up. And Qloo's not going to tell me like, oh, the reason you like it is, or the reason you switched to liking it is this. It's going to say like, no, here's what are the things that we might like about it, and then find other connections.
Gotcha. Huh. Yeah. No, I'm always like taking notes if there's like a great soundtrack. Well, like BoJack Horseman on Netflix, they use Group Love for their introduction, and I was a big fan of that band beforehand. And it resonated with me extra well because I really enjoyed the music, and then the show obviously hits well too. So
I'm a huge fan of a show that was on, and it's no longer on. Well, there's a second variation of it called Justified, and the intro song to Justified is a song by a group called Gangsta Grass, which melds bluegrass and gangsta hip hop. And had never heard that before and was blown away. And now I've been to multiple Gangsta Grass concerts. They're amazing live. It's a great live show. So, having that kind of occurrence is just one of the things that we love about what we do, that somebody may come to this and be like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Or I didn't even know that was out there. I have played banjo for a few years, and, I listen to bluegrass and listen to Americana. Never would have thought it would go well together with another genre I listen to, which is, hip hop, and they make an amazing sound together.
That's unusual crossover, but hey, it works. It works.
I recommend it to everybody. Go queue up some Gangsta Grass on your Spotify or Amazon Music or whatever you listen to.
Okay, so I kind of back to the previous question. I'm just curious if has Qloo ever like uncovered maybe a correlation or an insight that really surprised you or your clients?
Interestingly, I have to answer this in the inverse. We surprise clients and we think ultimately users, because the API access is something more of a customer or a larger business will want to integrate, like you mentioned, the Matches and the Tinders and credit payment cards of the world. And we don't see as much with the direct user. However, we do have, and this is something that people kind of don't realize about us, is we have a site called Taste Dive. So tastedive.com, and you can go to that and start liking and sharing and cultivating a list of things that you're interested in. Again, all across all of these musicians, books, movies, everything. But the reason I say I have to do it in the inverse is a lot of times people will respond and say, well, I put in something into the API, a query for physical location or another entity, and I didn't get back what I was expecting, which was something like, I put it in for Times Square, New York, and I didn't get back McDonald's. And I was like, well, why would you? It's like, well, because it's all over the place and millions of people eat there. It's like, that's great. That's an interesting way to think about it, but that's not exactly what Qloo's doing. We're not looking for what do people spend most of their money on all the time, although money is a great way to indicate certain things and their personal interests. And while I can argue that tons of people are interested in eating at McDonald's, what we're doing is not just trying to show you like the most, purchased item in an area. We're trying to show you what people in that area, perhaps maybe aspirationally or in terms of their own culture, cultivating their sense of style or their personas, are wanting to integrate with. So when you put in Times Square and you don't get back McDonald's, the reason for that is fairly understandable once we get into it. But I think that's what surprises some folks, is that we're not just surfacing like, well, the most popular shoe brand is Nike, and say, there you go. So you get Nike for everything. Our models are much more nuanced to be able to say like, yeah, the new Air Jordans are dropping, and that's what people are definitely interested in. But we're not just going to return to you like, oh, I'm interested in shoes. Great. How about Nike? Like, well, that's not at all surprising. That's not at all as useful as saying like, all right, let's get much more into the cultural trend of what's the new drop, what are the new collabs between someone and Adidas, say. And that's what we're really trying to focus on and get in front of our customers. Because if we were just somebody who was like, yeah, if you happen to be downtown New York and we put in and you get back fast food restaurants.
That's kind of like that's the whole value add, right? I mean, is because you don't want them to expect a certain answer and get that answer. I mean, when they work with you and connect the dots, they start seeing, oh wait, the client has to sort of find a way to make sense of the data in a way, right, where they're able to kind of connect their product or service with that connection and say, hey, okay, well, maybe we can get value if we connect with X customer or billboard that we see on Times Square, right? Because you're just showing them what the data shows, and then the client kind of has to make extrapolations, right?
Right. They have to extrapolate a bit. So a lot of what we do is talking with our clients about what it is they're seeing in the data. And then this is, again, just a sort of a academic researcher bias in my past. Asking questions really well can be tough. So instead of just saying, what's the most cited thing in New York Times Square right now, which might get you back, Nike, McDonald's, and some things, because a lot of people do interact with those. So we do have that in the system, and lots of social interactions go with that. What we want to help clients understand is like, think about what you're trying to ask. Is it a persona that you've identified and you want to find ways to extend what you're offering to that persona? Maybe it's a young urban woman who is perhaps like first-time job, lives with multiple people, and you're trying to help like wardrobe. So the clothing, what's both affordable but stylish for New York. Or, maybe you've got some international sense, and maybe you're looking across Canada or Portugal or Japan and saying like, I really need to understand this market because I don't right now. And I want to put in if I put in, I know this item might be popular, what correlates with that might also be popular that fits closer to me. So I know K-pop Demon Hunters is, that's actually a US movie. I understand. Don't come for me, K-pop fans. I understand. But, if we get that sense and say like, all right, that's popular, what in Soul it could be like that could be popular that we could start thinking about, and what are other things that we could look for in terms of like movies to promote or places to put billboards or brands to partner with. Those are the kinds of questions that for Qloo, nobody else can do that. And we love that. And that's what's fantastic. So sometimes you do have to have that kind of conversation. It's like, well, I put in Seoul, Korea, and I didn't get bibimbap back. And I was like, well, probably because, we're looking at something other than just, what's on the most menus.
Now, you obviously work with a ton of different clients and all sorts of different industries. And I'm curious if you've kind of noticed like working closer with one industry over the other, or if there's an industry that maybe there's kind of untapped potential, or maybe that's like still kind of warming up to the idea of using a tool like Qloo's API.
Oh, I think there's tons of places that could be using us more. In our experience, and we have a lot of clients, some of the first people to pick up on it and get it really quickly is entertainment and, for lack of a better term, matchmaking. So we work with the largest matchmaking group, and we offer the API, and they use us to let people surface the interests they have. And they got it immediately to say, if I am looking at an app and I'm interested in some folks and I see that they've listed a number of things that they're into at the moment, maybe I can say like, oh, those are things that I also like, or that's so different than what I'm thinking about now. I'm definitely going to swipe right or indicate preference, however we do it in the apps nowadays. Again, I'm an old and didn't grow up with these apps. So they got this idea very, very quickly. Entertainment, like you mentioned, the Netflixes and other entertainment centers of the world, or other entertainment providers of the world, get it very quickly. What makes a movie and what makes it interesting, and why do you happen to like it, in places with tons of content to try to cross-pollinate across their groups, totally get it. I think one of the big places that truly needs it, and we're doing some work in this area, and we have an amazing person at the company that, if you want to do another podcast with us, I would 100% talk to. His name's Peter Opoku, and really getting in this idea of real estate. So if you think of something that has a lot of buyers at one time who you want to keep happy, apartment renters and people in buildings who need to stay in a specific place, what could real estate companies be doing to both understand that audience, to start tailoring content for that audience? Big apartment complexes, you'll often have social gatherings. You'll often have just design of the space. You'll have interest in what it is, special partner, or when you're competing for renters, maybe there are special offers you can make with companies around the area. I think there's a huge opportunity for real estate, especially those companies that own really big real estate footprints, to start using this to understand who it is, who's in their building, how they should position it. Maybe even start helping companies find places to build real estate. If some company caters to maybe a much more staid, long-term rental, older, somebody who's like, downsized from a big house, empty nesters. What's a good place in the US to start investing and building there, to get a sense of the neighborhoods and where to start putting that kind of property? Again, what should you buy in downtown Chicago, downtown Miami, downtown Austin, to say like, I'm really going after the young, hip audience who's willing to spend on luxury accommodations, even if they don't stick around as long as some of the older folks. So I understand there's going to be some churn, but if I can keep getting in the same kind of people, I think there's a huge opportunity in that space.
Real estate's an interesting one, because it I don't know, you wouldn't necessarily associate it with some of these these tech trends with AI, and also with kind of the movement of putting everything on the blockchain and tokenization, and trying to get like NFTs for physical assets like real estate. So yeah, that'd be great to talk to Peter one of these days and kind of dive into that subject as well. But I think what kind of made me think of the question, think of that question was just like, there's so much talk around just this kind of bubble brewing, and everyone's trying to race to jump into AI and adopt it and integrate it as quickly as possible. And I mean, there hasn't been an episode here on the SourceForge podcast where we haven't brought up AI. I mean, every company is integrating it, right? It's the talk of the town, and sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. So I was just kind of curious, like, is like all has kind of the value already been extracted as much as possible, or is there still sort of, room and industries to go to integrate this technology into and work with? Obviously there's going to ebbs and flows. It's really hot right now. It's going to cool off inevitably, but I don't know. You just kind of liken it to like the dot-com bubble. And I think and the difference I think really is you need more kind of resources to get involved here, as opposed to maybe the dot-com bubble where all you really needed was like a web address, essentially.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on this. Everybody's making the analogy to the dot-com bubble, and it's the right one, because I think even below the surface layer, the comparisons are still pretty interesting. So to your first question, is there more value to be extracted, or has it already been extracted? It is. We are just at the beginning of getting value from AI in terms of efficiency gains and improving workflows and changing the way people interact with their tools, their home appliances, their cars, each other. Like, we're only early days in how this is going to change everything we do. That said, much like the internet at the dot-com bubble, it's clearly a concern when we have such investment in very particular things. So right now, all of this CapEx is going into infrastructure. So building data centers and getting power to these things so that we can have compute, building the chips, buying the chips, making sure people have availability. If you notice, all of the like OpenAI deals are all infrastructure. They're not going and making some deal with MIT or Caltech or Stanford to try to own a whole bunch of research. They're trying to own the infrastructure. In the dot-com bubble, that's what was overinvested in, is everybody thought, all right, we just have to have massive internet pipes to everything as fast as possible. But the problem was people weren't sure what to do with it yet. It was incredibly valuable. Nobody's going to argue, at least nobody I know of is going to argue that the internet didn't radically change life across the world. That said, a ton of investment went into it very early. Not everything needed a website. You didn't, and I was part of this. I was at a .com company that ended up failing, and we were charging people double-digit millions of dollars to make an interactive website that had no commerce, no login ability, no saving anything, just a nice flashy kind of advertisement. Because the idea was everybody needs this. So right now, I think we're still in this phase of everybody needs AI, everybody needs it for everything. We'll figure out what it does later. It's going to change more than I can even describe, and as an economic level, and I am not, a financial markets person, but I do wonder about the financial bubble and, this kind of, everybody's talking about circular payments. NVIDIA's putting money into OpenAI so that OpenAI can buy chips from NVIDIA, and you kind of go around and around. And, I'm in a group chat with a bunch of people, we're in a bubble, we're not in a bubble. What does the bubble look like? What happens if the bubble breaks? What happens if it just slowly leaks? So there's lots of perspectives on this. But I do think there is so much more to be gained in the use of AI and the application of AI to tons and tons of industries. And Qloo is, a clear part of that. We are changing how people think about recommendations from what you mentioned earlier to much more expansive. Think about it not just as, tracking some purchases and saying, all right, the next thing they're going to buy, we'll offer them 10% off only. It's, you're going to a brand new city. Here's the hotels you might like. Here's a deal on some restaurants that you've never been to, but look like the ones you kind of like. So a much more cohesive view of the individual than I think companies can get right now.
That makes sense. I mean, I think the value of is definitely there. I think it's just obviously comes down to the timeline and being able to just integrate it at a certain like sooner than later. And then you look at like all the investment dollars being spent now are, like, is the value going to be tangible like within the next few years? Or are we looking like now? I feel like it's I don't know, it could be 5+ years out. And then, so you kind of have that sort of, I don't know, investment dollar bubble kind of brewing. But like, I think I do think the value is definitely there. I mean, you look back in the past, like, so back in like the 2010s, I remember, I always preferred Pandora over Spotify and over other streaming channels because the algorithms were vastly superior at the time. And they played all my favorite artists, while Spotify at the time was way more hit or miss, But back then, Spotify really improved, and now they're the largest music streaming service in the world because they invested so heavily in the right places at the time. They noticed what people liked, and they worked to improve.
Yeah, and they invested across like traditional machine learning and typical and old anything these days more than 6 months is, I guess, old. But the data science and the machine learning, I have friends that work at Spotify, and they are doing what you would consider, let's make it this, non-generative AI kind of work, and they're fantastic at it, and they just pour all of this time and energy into it, and it's seen massive gains. And it doesn't mean that machine learning is done and over and everything should be generative AI. We're still getting value out of traditional machine learning. So now hopefully the generative AI boom can help them be even more efficient and get better even faster. And then maybe a competitor to Spotify comes up even faster and we find other things. So, I don't happen to be a fan of monopoly, so I love competition, and I'm always looking for new things. And finding new services and new tools and all that. So I love the idea that we are in a position where somebody can go from zero to idea so quickly.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, you can program your own, Spotify app in the most simple of terms, just from vibe coding nowadays. I think, but the point is, like, they saw kind of the real value that they're adding by being able to have a really good recommendation service, and they executed on it, and they had, obviously a little bit better of a business model than Pandora, but and I don't know what Pandora was doing at the time. Maybe they just enjoyed the limelight and kind of got comfortable. But now obviously it's a thing in the past. No one ever uses Pandora. It's all just either Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube Music, So I'm just curious now. So looking where we are currently in 2025, what do you think the next few years will look like as AI continues to just shape how we understand and maybe even define culture?
I think we're going to have a lot of discussions and hand-wringing and concern and rapid adoption over how this turns into the ways that we interact with each other. So the best one obviously right now is TikTok. It has a fascinating algorithm. I have no idea how they do what they do. It turns on a dime. You like, for my example, one banjo playing video, and then suddenly, it's got 3,000 banjo playing videos following up like immediately. They're very adept. They're very fast. They're very addictive. The better AI gets, the better that's going to be. And now we have Sora as an app, and we're looking not at humans, but we're looking at generated figures, and those are kind of amusing. And you're going to start getting a sense of, do people like moving to that because they can generate anything and they can remix and they can put their own spin on it? Or do we like the human side of things where they're fallible or making mistakes or they're trying and we can see that? I think we're going to have a lot of this go back and forth. As we were discussing before, I think one of the big worries right now is that generative AI is going to destroy the creative class. The counter argument to that is, right, but then anybody can be a creator because the cost to entry is so low. But then you want to get into questions of expertise and what makes it good and having taste and how you get there. As Yogi Berra says, predicting is difficult, especially about the future. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I, have a whole lot of angst over some of these debates that I think use words willy-nilly without really describing them or defining them, and everybody gets caught up on them. I do think the next few years are going to have a huge amount of debate about where we let these in, where does it fit, how does it fit what we want for ourselves and how we interact with people and each other and our family members, especially kids and phones. So, I don't know exactly what the technology looks like, but I'm pretty certain it's going to cause a massive disruption in the discussion. And we're just going to be talking about this for a while. So even when AI becomes more ubiquitous in all the tools, the discussion, I think, is going to just keep roiling until we get to some place where we've agreed either passively or actively, this is what we allow and this is what we're doing.
100% agree. Yeah, I think we're already having that discussion now, and it's only going to get worse, especially as people don't know what's real and what's not. We're already starting to see that with the new Sora 2 model, and what's interesting I've noticed too is some of my favorite creators have been sharing some of these Sora 2 videos, and then I'll look in the comments, and a lot of the comments are all just like, "We stop! I don't want this AI content. I want, you know." They're kind of I don't know, that they're not very welcoming of it, and you know, I totally get that. I think there's going to be kind of an emphasis, at least from the creator side of things, for more human-made content. But that being said, I mean, this is the tidal wave of AI is already here. It's going to be, I mean, it's going to be integrated and it's going to be used in some fashion. I think it just bring up a lot of interesting questions of just what makes content unique and personal.
How do we get everybody, to use the overdone term AI literate? How do we get people to be both skeptical of what they see in terms of, well, is that really what's going on, but not become cynical, right? So not say, oh, all media is just generated and I can't believe anything. Like, how do we get people to find sources of truth for themselves and be able to dig into things? Because as we go through this, it's clearly we're just going to be inundated with more and more of it, and people will get upset, and some people will like it. And, I know tons of people in the animation industry who are like, this is amazing. Look at these kind of cool things I can do. But in the filmmaking industry, it's like, well, the jobs in and around like physical Hollywood have absolutely bottomed out. They've gone other places. It's too expensive to make movies in LA now for, the first approximation. So we're going to have this back and forth, and it's going to be very difficult to get trust in the things that get made, and helping, not just kids, but like older generations who aren't used to seeing it, or who are a little bit more willing to immediately trust what they see from a particular source, to say, maybe you need to be more skeptical. Maybe you need to question. Maybe you need to find other sources. So I have no particular solution for that.
No, and I don't think there is right now. I think you kind of have to just wait and see how it shakes out. I mean, I think that obviously there's going to be some probably regulations floated. There already are some regulations kind of being floated, implemented on the state level, but it's more or less kind of a Wild West trying to just figure out how this develops and shakes out. And but I think just, generally having just disclaimers and labels, I think could be just a really good starting ground, just so that people know that it's AI. But obviously those aren't perfect either. So it's tough. It's tough. Now there's obviously a bunch of different bottlenecks or pain points in the AI space right now. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, working in the industry, if you could change or fix one of those kind of bottlenecks, what would you change first? And I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind.
A few things. There are obviously small technical things. Everybody should be using evals. Evals should be easier to use and understand. The things that come out of these LLMs probably ought to have, by default, some form of confidence ranking, so that we get a sense of exactly what it says, just, that's as a requirement, or as just a good practice. How certain are you of this answer, and get it to rate itself? Because we're getting into this sort of like Ouroboros kind of, LLMs as judge, and then LLMs as judges of LLMs as judges, and, getting into that cycle. Something has to be in there to get the human to understand, well, how confident and how certain are you? From a bigger sense, there are a couple of things that I would love is, when we talk about open source and closed source, I think so much of our focus is on the models and saying like, well, ChatGPT, even though the company's called OpenAI, certainly doesn't have an open source model. Anthropic doesn't have an open source model. Gemini is not an open source model. They're the leaders, but open source is clearly, getting better and catching up in a number of ways. And even just this past week to 2 weeks, we've seen really interesting advancements in tiny models. So tiny reasoning models that are focusing on specific tasks and specific problems, and they're turning out to be really, really good. And that should make us all really, really excited, because it means this type of stuff can show up at the edge on smaller tools. I wonder about the closed versus open infrastructure, as we talked about. So right now, all of the AI infrastructure, chips, power, it really just a very closed system. It takes so much money to even consider building a data center, or a chip fabrication location, or even just chip design. So one of the revolutionary and fantastic things about NVIDIA is it doesn't make those chips, right? It's a chip designer, and then outsources manufacturing and controls, obviously, quality. But who are those competitors to an NVIDIA coming up? We talk about Intel or AMD, but that's all still closed source. Is like what we are getting to is a very, very specific oligarchy or oligopoly under infrastructure, even when open source models are going to start challenging the closed source models. So I would love to see more competition and more support for new companies and open source design and power generation and thoughts about how we take this out of the hands of just a couple of companies. Because my view is these LLMs are going to become the power company, right? Like everybody's going to be using AI. It's going to sit on something, and there's only going to be one or two players who provide that. Or like, are we going down the same path as we had for, say, Con Edison and all of these?
Yeah, it's really fascinating answer. I mean, I was just thinking of the different. So you have two different approaches, right? You have the U.S. kind of leads in the frontier kind of models, and we have the superior chips. But then you look at like a strategy from like China they're really pioneering and leading with the open source models, and they're catching up with the chips. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see in the next few years and like, the next decade or so, kind of how that shakes out. Because once you have these really capable open source models and a more diverse kind of hardware set for companies to choose from and integrate with, is there still going to be as much of a reliance on some of these established frontier models we see from the big giants?
Yeah. So the other thing that if I could wave a magic wand, I would have us all just stop talking about AGI. Like, I think it's a completely useless, contentless term. There's no real definition for intelligence, so I don't know what artificial general intelligence is supposed to mean. OpenAI has defined it as hundreds of billions of dollars in sales. Like that cannot be a useful generalization of some measure of intelligence. And we have these tests, the ArcBench and the Humanity's Last Exam. I don't know that we get anything from saying, oh, we've hit AGI, we've not hit AGI, other than more hype and money for the companies that are building these models. Is it a model that can do things better than humans can? We have that right now. Is it a model that can pick up skills faster than humans can? We have that right now. Is it something that models the sort of ineffable about humanity and taste? That's going to take generations. Like, I don't know how we get to that. And it's certainly not just scaling up the amount of tokens we put into a training system. But that doesn't negate how important and how powerful and how useful these tools are. So I just don't know what the value is in having the sense of like, well, once we reach AGI, all this other stuff is going to happen.
Right. Yeah. It's just a shiny new moniker to chase and it's just term to slap on the same old thing in a sense. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I want to ask, kind of circle back around to your career of the final few questions I have for you. So you've obviously been a software developer. You've led various teams in various capacities, and I think it's interesting because we're in this sort of in the midst of a low fire hiring culture. People, especially those working in tech, really. I mean, I don't know. I think this goes with anybody really, but no one likes to be told what to do. But I think people in tech, especially, maybe they lack like certain maybe social skills, but they also value autonomy over how they solve their problems. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that make for a competent team. So I'm just curious, what do you think are the qualities modern leaders and team leaders need today to navigate the work environment?
It's a really good question, and it feels like it should be changing, but I consistently go back to the things that I think have helped me work well and build teams that have worked well together. The first is trust, and having a really good sense that I can trust a team member to do what they say they're going to do, who complete what they say they're going to raise questions when they need to. So part of trust is not simply that, well, you are, the highest member of your graduating class at MIT or Stanford, and therefore I can trust that you know how to do this. I want people who will raise their hands and have the trust to say, I'm not sure how to do this, or I tried something and I don't think it worked. Could I get some help, or could I get some input, or could I get some views on this? I think having a culture that allows for failure, that allows for uncertainty, that allows for being vulnerable is the best way to get a team cohesion, because you get past blockers faster, you get past problems faster, you avoid individuals who will go down a rabbit hole and then be afraid to admit that it just didn't work, so they fight at trying to make their solution work when it just isn't going to, or it's eating up time that could be spent on a solution that will work. I think the ability to collaborate and be inquisitive are also those others, as even without, worrying about how good someone is at social skills, can they share in some way what they've been working on? It can be written, it can be verbal, it could be through comments in code, but what we can't have is the sort of isolated jerk, is the polite way to say it, is somebody who's just like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do and you can't bother me and you just have to accept my output and then I get to move on to the next thing I'm going to do. Those are the hardest things. No matter how high performing they are, they end up being more of a problem. And then finally, inquisitive is, I have found the teams that are best are the ones where people just don't stop asking why, or wanting to pick at something and say, like, but can't we do this better? Or is there a better reason for this? And I do want to use this opportunity to shout out those people that I work with right now. They are all like this, but a bunch of them are also fantastic at asking why about business, not just a technical problem, but like, is this going to help us sell more of what we need? Is this problem, if we answer this problem, is it going to help make things better for a customer? Why is a customer not doing certain things? Why are we having issues in this area? So just being inquisitive about technical things is great, but being inquisitive about the reason you're building what you're building is easily the best predictor of a truly successful person and team.
It speaks volumes to just how the interest level and how devoted they are to that specific thing they're working on. But yeah, I think that's great answer, great feedback. I mean, I think going back to the trust, that's like the hallmark staple for every successful relationship and partnership, and being able to work with others and asking the right questions. Great insights there. My other question for you, and I'm sure there's a lot of different books and podcasts and speeches and whatnot that you've listened to that kind of shifted your perspective and opened your eyes. And maybe it's business related, maybe it's not. But I'm just curious, like, what's one thing that's really shaped how you lead or think about innovation or think about what's going on in the AI space? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I'm going to take the first one. How I think about what's in the AI space is different. Shaped me as sort of a person who works with teams and in teams and leads teams. Two things, and they're pretty old. One is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like, the old joke about like, well, trust and collaboration, those are skills that we should be learning at like kindergarten. I think there's even a whole book about this. But actualizing those in a business relationship can be hard. Dale Carnegie's book does a great job showing cases and specifically spelling out like, this is how you go about it. And these are the cases and the times when you should be working on it. Fantastic book. I recommend it to everybody. The other one is called The Culture Code and is much more of a scientific view of like going through and trying to understand what makes truly successful teams and why certain teams work together. And it comes down to some of what I've talked about. And these are the things I mentioned. Vulnerability, trust, experimentation. They cite the terrific experiment about putting business school kids against kids in kindergarten to build the tallest tower with straws, I believe. And it turns out the kindergartners win. And to ruin the punchline, the idea is the kids are willing to experiment and fail very quickly, whereas people who are older have a notion of like, well, let's write down what we're going to do and let's talk about it and let's make sure, everybody's viewpoint is heard equally. Not that that's a bad thing, just there's a time and place for that. And the kids in the kindergarten are just like, let's build something and see what happens. And then they find a solution much quicker. So having that kind of team that has the culture to say, I tried it, it didn't work. I need some help on something, or I did really well. I really want to celebrate just how amazingly well I did at something. That kind of stuff comes from recognizing the team as humans and understanding what makes it valuable for them to be participating and contributing. And so I think the culture code really just condensed that for me and made it truly wonderful. What I look to for the future of AI, I listen to an inordinate number of podcasts. I love ones that are super technical and deep dive. I love ones that cover more general things. I'm going to shout out here the podcast by Every. Dan Shipperd is an amazing interviewer and does a terrific job at getting people to be both a little bit technical and think things higher. The podcast is called AI and I by Every. The Practical Engineer is a terrific newsletter to read, and it touches on not just engineering, but also AI topics. You can go through, there's Everyday AI. There's AI for Humans is fun, just as like a roundup for the week about like what happened and why it matters and if it matters. You can find tons of these. I find that it's less a specific resource as it is just being willing to consume a bunch of different ones. I'm constantly picking up and dropping podcasts, newsletters, websites I read, just because I think having the variety is just as good as getting like the right one and finding the right podcast that hits at the topics that I'm interested in all the time. Because I find myself being like, oh, I didn't think this would be that interesting. I really want to dig into that. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing. I've been literally writing these down as you've been saying it, even though this is being recorded. So, but this is great. Thank you. I've got lots of some homework and to do. And I mean, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a classic. Culture Code sounds really interesting. And one thing I was thinking, and I want to echo, I believe it was programmer Steve Yegi who really hammered this home, was just like the importance of reading long form content. And maybe it's a podcast of like consuming long form content. It really just trains your brain to focus and improve your reading comprehension skills. And because so often it's like the internet's just catering towards that short-term attention span, and it's literally contributing to what Gen Z calls brain rot, I'd say. So that's one thing I've been working on, and I've got even more content here thanks to your suggestions to improve upon that. So I appreciate it. But I think that's it for the questions I have for you. I really appreciate all the things you've shared with us. Lots of insights.
I appreciate being invited. I appreciate the discussion, the time and effort you've put into thinking about Qloo and the conversation we've had. It's been terrific, Bo. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hopefully we can have you back one of these days and continue to chat about this subject.
Anytime.
There's no shortage of things to talk about. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. That's Ian Cook, SVP of AI at Qloo. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to the SourceForge podcast. I'm your host, Bo Hamilton. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of the upcoming B2B software related podcasts. I'll talk to you in the next one.